Imagine you're a US diplomat, sitting in your home in a foreign country. Suddenly, you hear a strange high-pitched sound like a drill boring into your skull. There's no one around. No source. Just pain. Within seconds, you're dizzy, nauseous, and your ears are ringing. You move to another room, and it stops. This isn't science fiction. This happened to over 1,000 US officials, soldiers, and spies, and almost 10 years later, the US government still can't fully explain it. This is the story of Havana Syndrome, and in 2026, we may finally be closer to the truth than ever before. Let's go back to late 2016. The US had just reopened its embassy in Havana, Cuba, after decades of frozen relations. It was supposed to be a moment of diplomatic progress. Instead, embassy staff started reporting something bizarre. They described sudden, intense headaches. Pressure inside their heads, like something was squeezing their brain. Vertigo so severe they couldn't stand. Nausea. A constant ringing or popping in their ears. And then there was the sound. Several victims described an intensely high-pitched, almost piercing noise, one that seemed to come from nowhere, and would fade the moment they walked into another room. At first, it sounded like nothing more than stress, or maybe a strange insect. But as more diplomats came forward with the exact same symptoms, it became clear something was happening. And nobody had an explanation. The media gave it a name, Havana Syndrome. Here's where the story gets bigger. Havana Syndrome didn't stay in Havana. Over the following years, similar cases started popping up all over the world: China, Russia, Austria, even near Washington, D.C. itself. U.S. intelligence officers, soldiers, and diplomats stationed across the globe began reporting the same cluster of symptoms. One former security officer stationed in China described hearing a strange sound like a marble circling down a metal funnel, always at the exact same spot in his apartment, right above his son's crib, at the same time every night. By the time the dust settled, more than 1,500 American officials had come forward, describing some version of this same nightmare. For some, the damage was so severe they were forced to retire early or leave their careers altogether. This was no longer a Cuba problem. This was happening to America's intelligence community on a global scale. Now here's where the frustration sets in for victims. For years, the U.S. intelligence community couldn't agree on what was even causing these symptoms, or if there even was a single cause at all. In 2023, an official intelligence assessment came to a controversial conclusion: it was very unlikely that any foreign adversary was behind the incidents. Many agencies pushed the theory that the symptoms could be explained by stress, anxiety, or pre-existing conditions, essentially suggesting it was psychological, not physical. You can imagine how that landed with victims who say they heard literal weaponized sound, lost their balance, and in some cases permanently damaged their hearing or cognitive function. A 2025 review doubled down on that same conclusion. Most of the intelligence community still saw foreign involvement as highly unlikely. For almost a decade, the people experiencing this were essentially being told, it's probably not real, or it's in your head. But that wasn't the end of the story. While official assessments downplayed the threat, a separate group of investigators inside the Defense Intelligence Agency were noticing a disturbing pattern. A retired lieutenant colonel who led part of the Pentagon's internal investigation noticed something strange: the people getting hit weren't random. They were consistently the top-performing officers, the best of the best across the agency. And in case after case, there was a connection back to Russia. Independent investigations went even further, digging into Cold War-era research. They found that the former Soviet Union had spent years studying how specific microwave frequencies could affect the human brain, producing effects like loss of consciousness, seizures, memory loss, headaches, and balance problems. Sound familiar? Some scientists who studied this decades ago actually warned officials that this kind of weapon could be behind incidents like these, but according to those scientists, their research was quietly shelved by parts of the U.S. government. This is where the story shifts from mysterious illness to something that sounds a lot more like a targeted attack. Now here's the part of the story that made headlines in early 2026. It was revealed that, quietly, in late 2024, U.S. Homeland Security investigators had acquired a mysterious device through an undercover operation. The cost? reportedly in the 8 figures, tens of millions of dollars. What made this device so significant? It was portable, about the size of a backpack. It contained components of Russian origin. And it emitted pulsed radiofrequency energy, a type of energy investigators believe could be capable of producing the exact same effects victims of Havana Syndrome have described for almost 10 years. The Pentagon has reportedly been quietly testing this device for over a year, trying to determine whether it can recreate the same symptoms in controlled conditions. Think about that for a second. For nearly a decade, parts of the government insisted this kind of technology didn't exist, that there was no proof a directed energy weapon was even possible. And now, they may be holding the very device that proves otherwise. One former senior CIA officer, who says he personally suffered these symptoms after being targeted in Moscow back in 2017, didn't hold back. He said agencies had always claimed this technology simply didn't exist, and built their entire official assessment around that assumption. If a working device has actually been found, that entire assessment may now be obsolete. This is where things get even more controversial. In early 2026, a major investigative report accused parts of the CIA of something serious, a cover-up. The claim was that internal assessments downplaying the foreign adversary theory weren't just wrong, they may have been intentionally shaped to avoid diplomatic and political fallout. And then, just weeks ago, in June 2026, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence took a dramatic step. She officially revoked 2 previous intelligence reports on Havana Syndrome, citing faulty tradecraft. In simple terms, the official investigation admitted that earlier reports weren't done properly, and a brand new review has now been launched. After almost 10 years of denial, dismissal, and contradiction, the U.S. government is essentially starting over. So where does that leave us? We have over 1,000 victims with consistent, well-documented symptoms. We have Cold War research proving this kind of weapon was theoretically possible decades ago. We have a real, physical device acquired in secret that may be able to recreate these exact effects. And we have a government that just admitted its previous investigations were flawed. Is this a Russian-directed energy weapon used against U.S. officials worldwide? Or is there still a piece of this puzzle we're missing? As of mid-2026, the official investigation is still ongoing, which means, for now, Havana Syndrome remains one of the most chilling unresolved mysteries of our time. What do you think really happened? Drop your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to Hidden Truth, because some truths don't stay hidden forever.